Welcome to Hot Springs Village Inside Out, a weekly podcast where Hot Springs Village, Arkansas is the star. Join me, Randy Cantrell, and my co-host Dennis Simpson as we discuss the history, facts, people, places, events, lots more surrounding Hot Springs Village, Arkansas. Visit the website at hotspringsvillageinsideout.com. Thanks for clicking play. I have a request. It's a special request for today's episode. Go to the website, hotspringsvillageinsideout.com/360. hotspringsvillageinsideout.com/360. The reason this is important is I have a downloadable PDF and I've got all kinds of links, and these are going to be things that are going to be really important for you to have in front of you as you're listening or watching today's episode. I appreciate you listening. We hope you'll subscribe. Tell a friend. Welcome back to another episode of Hot Springs Village Inside Out. That's the website, hotspringsvillageinsideout.com. If you want to do it the short way, do hsvinsideout.com. Today, I have asked our resident expert, Mr. Dennis Simpson, to give us a little bit of a, well, as he calls it, if you were to swing a cat around, sorry for you cat lovers.
I'm sorry.
But the kind of just the 360 of day trips, places that would be, that are noteworthy, that you can tell us about, Dennis, that would be great day trips from the village.
Well, I have to do the mandatory cough because it's that season. Sorry.
Exactly.
We can cut that out if we need
No,
to.
that's all right.
Because there comes another one, son of a gun. Anyway, one of the areas that you look at here in the village, if you look at the village on a map, to the north of it is a national forest. To the west of it is a national forest. To the south of it is a national park. To the east of it is Benton and a more of a metropolitan area. But in every direction, if you went an hour in any direction from the village, you could go an amazing list of places. And that was one of the reasons I suggested some of these things today. You know, Randy, you and I had talked about Petit Jean. Some people call it Petit Jean. And literally from where we sit, get out Highway 7, drive straight up, and you'll be sitting on top of a mesa in the middle of the delta, basically, of the river valley, the Arkansas River Valley. And that mesa is about 950 feet off the ground, or off the regular floor level. And literally you'll go, well, I wonder how I know when I'm in Petit Jean, because there's a mesa coming up out of the river valley. And it's right there by Russellville, not very far away at all. But one of the most magnificent things is as you drive across it, you can see this little mesa for, probably 30 miles. And as you drive to it, you're thinking, wow, this is going to look really cool. Then as you go up the hill, which is rather steep in every direction, you get up to the very edge, the southernmost edge that they would say probably closest to the river, which is the Petit Jean grave site. Now, what's true, what's myth, what's legend, I don't know. The French explorers came up in the early 1700s, 1710, 1720, and they literally sailed up the Arkansas River, which the Arkansas means the people of the river people. Okay. And they stopped at La Petite Roche, which they named the Little Rock, which is on the south side of the river. And then obviously there was a big rock on the other side of the river. And as they kept sailing on up, which as they would go, probably wouldn't be another hour to 2 hours up the river, which was surprisingly navigable. But when they got to the edge, they had a little, what they call a cabin boy. And his name was Petit John. And he came down with a fever. And they carried him to the top of the mountain because, it's all about bad air. That bad air is what makes everybody sick, right? You get cancer from bad air or whatever, right, at the time. So they carried Petit John to the top of the mountain, undressed him, and was trying to wipe him down in wet rags to try and keep his fever down, and found out that Petit John was not Petit John, but Petit Jean. And unfortunately, she passed away and was buried up there. And there is the old, from the 1800s, there was a beautiful, beautiful hotel up there on the ridge. But when you get up to that point of the ridge, you will go to, this is part of the state park, and there's a 270-degree curve that goes around, and literally the river bends around like this. We'll show some pictures here in a minute. But as the river comes around, the mount sits here, and then the river comes around and winds back this way. It is a view that you would think you're in Peru or South America. It is unbelievable because the terrain changes so quickly. And you think, wow, this is just fantastic. And there's just huge rocks the size of this house sitting on the edge of this cliff. And people have fallen and died from there. It's not, it's not OSHA approved necessarily, if you know what I mean. But this entire point is just magnificent. And you think, wow, it couldn't get any better than this until, and this is the Dennis tip and secret, until trespass is such a rough word, don't you think? I mean, really, because right across the street, as you pull out and pull back onto the main road and start going back toward the lodges, which were built by the CCC and the WPA in the 20s, as you start driving up that way, on the left-hand side, there's the Elizabeth Mitchell church camp. And when you pull into there, act like you know where you're going. Just drive on through, Randy. Don't look at anybody in the eye. Just drive straight through.
Yeah.
And you will drive to the very edge of the cliff again, because you're on the edge of this mesa. And they have a church built on the edge of the cliff. It is an open wall church. The sides of the walls are completely open. The back of the building has a facade, right, and the front of this building has a huge glass facade. And you literally look through the sunrise coming in from the mornings. Now, if you get out, you can walk over and you get to fall down an 800-foot mesa too, as people unfortunately have done. But it's a holy place at the first time, and it becomes a more holy place the more you stay. And it's just the reverence of God that this place is built this way is just phenomenal. And they're really cool about it. I mean, they will have church camp here and there, but I mean, they know people come through just to go to the little chapel and sit and pray and look out the deal. But one of the most beautiful hidden places in all of Arkansas.
Well, when we came in 2018 and stayed at your place, might have been the first recommendation that you made for us. And we went straightway and hiked.
Did you go down to the waterfalls?
We did.
Yeah, you did hike, didn't you?
Yeah. We hiked, and we went. There's a lodge there, right?
Mm-hmm. Mather Lodge. Lodge. We
went there. Mm-hmm. Had lunch there, as a matter of fact.
A beautiful place.
Oh well, and the views out of that. I mean, I had them let us sit by a window, and I remember there was a glass cleaner who was cleaning the windows that day, and I'm like, that's a job I would not want. But yeah,
there was a lot of glass to clean.
Oh, a lot of glass. Spectacular though. Yeah, it was really spectacular. Yeah, it was. Yeah, highly recommended. Recommended.
Let me come out of the Elizabeth Mitchell camp there. Turn back out on the main road and let's go back down to Mather Lodge that you're talking about. Before you get there, though, one of the big influential names that I may not have even shared with you about this is the Rockefeller family, because they own a significant portion. As soon as you come to the first intersection, you'll literally have had to go past it and past their airport. But they own probably a third of the mountain is the Rockefeller family. And that was Winthrop Rockefeller, who was the state governor. And they have a cattle farm up there on top of the mesa. They have a cattle farm. It's a big, big place, as you can tell. As you drive on down, probably maybe a third of the way between you and the Mather Lodge on the other end, there's a huge car museum. And that is the Rockefeller Personal Car Museum. And it is magnificent too. I didn't realize at the time, I was a kid last time I went, and I didn't realize what a gem it was. It has some of the finest works of rare automobiles on the planet. It really is. Now, and they don't advertise very much. That's a great place to go also. But we travel on down the road and we come into the Petit State Park proper. A lot of this has been private land we've been driving past. As you come into Petit State Park, there's a campground with a lake that backs up to the airport on the other side. There's a campground on the other side that backs up to some private lodges over on the south side of the mesa, or the west side, I should say. And then as you drive on up, there's the Mather Lodge that was built by the CCC and the WPA. And I'm going to take a break and get a quick drink of water, and you're going to tell our listeners what the CCC and the WPA was.
Yeah, that ain't gonna happen.
A drink of water it is.
Yeah. This looks like an edit to me.
Does it? Well, that's just what it looks like.
Yeah.
The CCC was known as the Civil Conservation Soil, the Civil Conservation Group or couple or whatever. It was a CCC.
I'm old. I'm not that old.
Yeah, well, apparently I'm older than you here, because the WPA stands for the it's the Work Patrol Authority. And as you drive up Highway 7, when you drove up Highway 7, one of the curviest, one of the top 10 roads, according to Porsche, of North America.
Right.
You drove across some very old stone-looking kind of bridges.
Yes.
The WPA and the CCC built those, and those were basically projects that right up until World War II, because the Great Depression had been so hard on people, they had camps of men that would live, and you drove past 2 separate camps on the way up there. But as you drove up there, you would see that there would be these camps on the side of the road, and this is where young men would go. And something like 80 to 85% of their check was sent back home. They lived on site, and it was a very quasi-military agreement. But Randy, when you went into the Mather Lodge and you looked around and you saw this beautiful old rustic furniture, that was handcrafted by the WPA over 100 years ago.
Really?
Yes.
And
Every one of those. Yeah. Oh yeah. Still use it. They still use it every day. They use it every day.
Yeah.
In particular, when you walk into the lobby, there's a whole bunch of chairs just sitting there.
Right.
The part that you saw probably had a little pyramid, I mean, like a A-frame roof, and glorious. Right. And you look out over the valley, and for those of you who haven't been there, there's a huge horseshoe valley that comes in, and the horseshoe comes up, and then it comes up to the end of Mather. Where the lake is that I was telling you about, I put my hand up, where the lake is by the airport, that lake overflows and spills into the I think it's a 95-foot waterfall that is the Mather Falls to the bottom. And if I'm not mistaken, Randy, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's about 1.5 miles down to the waterfall and about 5.5 back up the hill. Is that not? Yeah. And it's exactly the same path.
Yeah, or 10.5 back up.
Yeah, you were huffing and puffing coming back up the hill, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, I had no idea. I mean, this is what naive hiking will do for you. You just set out and you're like, oh, yeah, we'll be good.
This is what happens when you listen to your Airbnb guide. Don't do that. You knew better.
Yeah, no, not so much.
Not
I
so
did
much.
it anyway.
Anyway.
I was glad. We were glad. We were absolutely glad that we did it. And we are far from like professional fit hikers. We're old, but it was worth it. It's not a speed contest. Nobody had a clock on us, so it was all good.
And in case we make it sound too hard, it's really not that hard because, as you said, you can go at your own pace.
Correct.
But on the way back up, it does get steep. And you may want to sit and have a little rest and, whatever. But I think they called it vigorous or something. It's not difficult or whatever, but it's vigorous.
I didn't have hiking poles. I would strongly suggest that you have at least one.
Or at least
that would have been nice, because I was looking for a stick or a broom handle or anything to get a leg up.
And it's a well-traveled path, so everybody else had already gotten all the sticks.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I
want to point out, I don't know if you even noticed, as you were coming up to the Mather Falls, right before you got up to it, probably within 400 yards, 300 yards, if you look way up on the hill, there's 2 or 3 ancient Indian caves that still have petroglyphs in them. They actually have Indian drawings on the wall from hundreds of years ago. It's a fabulous piece of history. But the Mather Lodge itself, the new A-frame that we were talking about, that new A-frame, and I say new, it was built in the last 20 years. The rest of that hotel had been there since the 30s and 50s. And all that furniture, it's magnificent. And for what, we have a lot of people that come and they want to see waterfalls, and I don't blame them. That sounds really cool. These are 95-foot waterfalls, and it's a glorious sight, in particular right after a big rain. Right, Randy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But we're going to come back in just a minute. We're going to talk about Lake Catherine waterfalls, probably more like 55 to 65, but it's a whole lot easier to get to. Okay. Yeah. So we'll come back to that in a minute. But from there, we're talking about swinging a dead cat for an hour. Sorry, dead cats. But if you're at Petit, Gene, you are literally maybe a 20-minute drive over to Mount Magazine, which is the highest point in Arkansas by far and away. And many people claim it's the highest point between the river and the Rockies, between the Mississippi and the Rockies. It's a little over 4,000 feet. And last time we were there, it was freezing and snowing big time on top of the mountain, not a drop on the bottom. And that's in Arkansas. I mean, not an hour 20 from here, but then let's swing the calendar a little more as we would come back that way, your way. You're going to come back down through the Lake Winona wildlife area. You're going to come back down through the 1.7 million acres of Ouachita National Forest. We were showing some video a little earlier and want to talk about this. The Flatside Wilderness area, which I say is that way, about 250,000 acres of profound wilderness. And you go, wow, I can't wait to drive there. Well, yeah, you can drive there to the outer perimeter of it. But if you remember, I said it is wilderness, and they mean it. It's wilderness. Now, the Flatside Pinnacle is on the far eastern side of it. It's easy to get to from Little Rock, pretty easy. I mean, you only have to go down like 10 miles of gravel road that way. But it's maybe a mile hike up there. And my dad's not in the greatest health. And we're kind of, I think you might be able to make it up there because it's a glorious view. And when you get to the top, you're looking westward from that point westward over 250,000 acres that are profoundly pristine. I mean, no lights, no motor car, not a single luxury kind of thing. And the other end of that, you drove right past on the way here, on the way up to Petit. And that is the Fork Mountain. And I'll send a picture of that too. But Fork Mountain and that area, there's natural caves there. There's a natural flow stone. We actually parked at the Fork Mountain access area. And you park there and you walk up a little gravel road that's been closed off only about a couple of decades. And you walk up that road maybe a mile, and there is a flow stone, again, the size of this house, that has a pond the size of this house and beautiful, pristine water that is coming out of the wilderness area, flowing over that year round. It is magnificent. I don't know that I would say it's a casual walk, but it's less than vigorous. How about that?
There you go.
That makes
okay.
sense?
Now, as a hiker who is interested in these things, is this an up there and back? Is there a loop in this hike, or are you going to like where this pool is that you described, and then you're on the same trail coming back?
Randy, I grew up in Benton, and I consider myself semi-country.
Yep.
And we would go to the wilderness area, I would go, oh, right. Yeah. Well, right. Well, it's a hike up to the pool.
Yep.
And then there's a trail about this wide.
Right.
It goes on up through the National Forest wilderness area as far as you want to get wilder.
Okay.
But it is, I mean, if you have a medical emergency.
Yeah. You better be prepared.
You better be prepared, because
you better know your limitations.
It really. And what I was going to tell you, Diane and I were at that area, at that pool, and another couple came up from Fort Smith, and they actually came and went up another goat trail to an even higher waterfall and an even larger pool up on another stream that fed the one we were in. But once again, you're literally off the grid. I mean, no, nothing. So is it a vigorous hike? No, it's up there and back. Can you go past that as far as you want? Yeah, but that's where you go from. I think I wore some flip-flops in here to where's your hiking boots? Where's your bug repellent? Where's your overnight snacks? Where's your two sources of light and water?
Right. And be responsible.
It gets really serious just beyond that. The area that I mentioned, though, the western end of the wilderness area, is called Fork Mountain, and it's that for a reason. It's because, once again, it's one of these huge mesas that looks like two forks sticking up. And you can actually see it from parts of the village here. Actually, as far as the crow flies, it's probably about 10, 12 miles that way. And that way is what direction? That would be north, okay. Just north of the village. And the beauty that I find is that there was, and this is all timberland now and national forest. And that's why, and I want to repeat, there's a facility up north called Blanchard Caverns, you may have heard of, not far from Mountain View. A magnificent, unbelievable cave facility that goes on for 7.5 miles. And at the end of that 7.5 miles, they say, oh, by the way, this goes 11 miles more into the next city. But we just didn't do anything with it because it's on national forest land and they cannot advertise. Just like this Fork Mountain, they can't advertise. That's part of the criteria, that these are their facilities, but they can't just promote them per se. So it's kind of hard to know where these is, or we'll put pins on if that's what you want to do, if anybody's really interested in going there. But Diane and I have stopped at the little cemetery, at the Fork Mountain Cemetery. And so that there were people trying to homestead this area a century ago or whatever. It grows great pine trees.
Yeah, there you
go. That's about it.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Yeah.
There's a lake just north of that called Cedar Lake that is unbelievably pristine and beautiful, and it's within walking distance of. It's a fire suppression lake, but it's within walking distance of Fork Mountain. But then when you come back a little further west, you get on Highway 7 and come down. You'll come down from that entrance of Fork Mountain. You'll come down 2 miles, and there's that CCC camp we were talking about.
Okay.
So as you come down a little further, and I'm sweeping the clock your direction this way as I'm going more westward, You're going to run past, as you get down to Jesseville, you're going to run past the Jesseville Visitor Station for the National Forest, which is fabulous. And I hope they've got it back open again. And that is where you get the real map. And I'm not exaggerating. You and I look at the National Forest of 1.7 million acres and we go, oh, it's a monolith. No. There are people that didn't want to sell their land back, and there's little patchworks. And you'll see where people have homes and whatever. It's the real map. And the map is, oh my Lord, it's 80 by 110. It's huge. You fold it out origami style and put it back. But as you come back through Jesseville, you're going to want to stop at the shack, right?
Yes. Yep.
Well, when they're open, not on Sundays.
Yeah, when they're open and when there's not like 400 motorcycle riders outside.
Because that's such a beautiful ride to go up through there.
I get it. Listen, I get it. And remember, hamburgers. This is good hamburgers.
Fantastic hamburgers, and cash only, because we don't want to see you leaving your flip-flop on the counter because you only had credit cards, you silly city person.
Right.
As you come down a little further, you're going to go right past Jim Coleman's place. And the Coleman brothers, there's Ron Coleman and Jim Coleman. Each of them have a Coleman crystal mine. We have had people come not long after you stayed with us, Randy. We had people show up that actually came from New York, and flew in to go to Jim Coleman's crystal mines. And they were delighted, thrilled, and euphoric that they had got to all these crystals. And they wanted to know if there was going to be an Uber from our house to the crystal mine. And I'm like, let me explain to you what country looks like. Yeah. Just west of that is going to be Lake Ouachita National Forest, or Lake Ouachita State Park, which is owned by the city, by the state, and it is part of the Lake Ouachita National Forest. And I didn't mention, I'm going through all these pieces, from Little Rock, just outside Little Rock, Lake Maumelle, to about 65 miles inside of Oklahoma, is the Ouachita National Trail. Now that's going to be very near Iron Springs, very near Jim Coleman, very near all those things. And if you just get to walk a few miles of it, or a mile back in and a mile back out, it's amazing. It's amazing because you realize it's not wilderness, because there are other roads. You will cross a gravel road here and there, which, makes it okay if you need to be helivaced out or something like that. But the bottom line is that these places are, it's, I heard an article on NPR one time, and they were doing a deal where, this is the quietest place in North America. If you sit here up in Washington State, you can't hear a plane or a jet or anything. And I'm like, you guys got to get out more. I can show you some quiet places, and you don't have to go to Washington State, Lake Ouachita State Park. Lake Ouachita is about 26,000 acres, has about 200 islands on it. You can go to any of the marinas and rent a boat, go out to an island and spend your day or a couple of days out there, just camp out on the island. We're one of the quickest ways to get to nature, or as what Greg, our former guest, said, someplace that doesn't look like Dallas.
Yeah. And we haven't traveled. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, we really haven't even traveled an hour one way yet.
You're 30 minutes. Petit is an hour. Yeah. But Fork Mountain is 35 minutes. The Lake Ouachita State Park, 30 minutes, not even 20 minutes probably. And then there's the little Blakely Trailhead. If you go to Lake Ouachita, for some of you that are still watching, and you're very patient people, thank you. If you look across from Lake Ouachita State Park and you look across the lake and you go, wow, this is such a beautiful, and that's all pristine over there. I wonder what that is. That's the little Blakely Trailhead. There's 32 miles of trails across the lake from you. And when you drive down what we call Strawberry 3000, you literally drive past the gravel road that'll take you across the lake from there. 32 miles. And Randy, it's amazing. They have trails that are old logging road trails. And then they have goat trails that are literally 6 to 8 inches off the edge of the cliff that goes down 65 feet to the lake. But once again, it's a great place to go fishing. If you want to be left alone, Blakely Trail, Little Blakely Trail is the spot. Also, by the way, we're talking about Lake Ouachita State Park and Mountain Pine, the home of Bobby Bones. Right beside Lake Ouachita and right beside Mountain Pine, if you continue through Mountain Pine, there's this beautiful little city. I mean, just cute as a button. And there's a mountain on the back of it, and there's a beautiful school, and you just keep driving. Next thing you know, you're into a Corps of Engineers park, and you're behind Blakely Mountain Dam. Now, people, as soon as the water comes out of Lake Ouachita through the Blakely Mountain Dam, it becomes Lake Hamilton. So there's a river right there, but that's technically Lake Hamilton that goes into Hot Springs, where we're going in a minute. And when they're generating power out of the back of that, the trout come running up like crazy. And there are people with deep sea fishing gear catching 65 and 45-pound trout out of the back of that thing. And you'll see people standing there, you're looking at a regular lake, you're looking somebody ready to catch a 13-pound test or 14. These guys have wires on, right, on the tackle. I mean, they're prepared to pull up a shark, if they had to, But anyway, and there's a beautiful little campground right there. We're going to spin the dial a little forward. We go on down to Lake Hamilton in Hot Springs. Lake Hamilton is run and owned by Entergy, the local power company. They draw it down every year. I'm going to tell you the good and the bad. If there was bad, I would have shared it with you so far. Lake Hamilton is beautiful. It has $1 million mansions on it, and 2 to 3 people a year die on that lake.
Crowded.
It's so crowded. And my joke was, if it gets any more crowded, they're going to have to put up stoplights on the lake.
Yeah.
And it's really dangerous. And I say all that to say, it's a beautiful place. But I mean, tens of thousands of people get on and enjoy that lake because it's got so much shoreline.
Right. Right. Yeah. Every time I've driven by, I've spent not much time there because I'm not real fond of that big of a crowd, but I'm like, yeah. Well, it looks like lakes around here. Yeah. Lakes around Dallas, Fort Worth, and unfortunately, because of the crowd and sometimes people drinking and driving on the water. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, there are fatalities every summer around here.
I don't know if you know this, Randy, but I don't know if you know this, but drinking in a boat apparently doesn't affect your judgment to most people the way drinking in a car does.
Yeah.
Who knew, right?
Yeah. I've never understood it.
Yeah. I think it probably does, right?
Yeah. You think?
Well, and when you go on down through Lake Hamilton, both sides, and once again, I need to recap because I didn't. Lake Ouachita, 26,000 acres roughly, but it has a buffer all the way around it. And that buffer is run by the Corps of Engineers, and you can't build on the lake. Outside of that buffer, it's all national forest. So Lake Ouachita is the water source for Hot Springs, some of the purest water in the United States, magnificent fishing and hunting and swimming. It's great. But because it doesn't have that urban density pressure on it, it's not so bad. When you get into Lake Hamilton, the water quality is still pretty good, but you have so much traffic and competition. It comes down to the Carpenter Dam, which is at the backside of Lake Hamilton. And then you go from that, and once again, it turns into Lake Catherine, which has a state park on it. It has Diamond Head. It has a couple of developments. But basically, you've heard people say the Tri-Lakes area. Mm-hmm. That's what they're talking about. It's Lake Ouachita, Lake Hamilton, and Lake Catherine.
Okay.
Lake Catherine is a beautiful state park. You were talking about what it looks like in Dallas around the lakes and whatever.
Right.
Lake Catherine is a classic instance, and I think they're going to fix this, but it's a problem. It's a tiny problem. Lake Catherine is beautiful. It's a great fishing lake. It's wonderful. Across the lake from you is an industrial park. And they've got smokestacks and they make corrosive chemicals and they're responsible citizens, but it doesn't exactly give you the natural feel.
Right.
But when you walk around, there's a hiking trail that takes you 1.5 miles up in the woods. And then you come back down to the waterfalls at Lake Catherine. And then when you get to the waterfalls, you come from there, maybe 400 yards back out to the parking lot. Smarter than the average bear. If you don't have the health to walk that first 1.5 miles, which can be kind of vigorous, you park in the parking lot and walk the trail backwards and you go right up to the waterfalls. And there's 3 enormous rocks up there, and the waterfalls are probably 55 to 65 feet, and they're nearly always flowing.
Yeah. Awesome. And at this point, we're how far outside the village, time-wise?
Maybe 45 minutes, because it's kind of as far contrary as it could be. Okay. But then when you come back in, one of my favorite gyms that you'll not get me to say a foul word about because there's nothing, and that is Garvan Gardens. Garvan Gardens is located, it's a peninsula located on Lake Hamilton. If I'm not mistaken, I think it's 450 acres. And Miss Garvin donated that land not to the University of Little Rock, not to the Hot Springs Community College or anything, but to the University of Arkansas at Fayetteville. And they brought in and put a huge botanical garden around this. In the spring, there's between 30 and 50,000 spring bulbs of tulips. Every denomination, color, variety, format you could ever imagine. They've got a small train set for kids that ride around. Part of that was built by the villagers. They've got a tree house that was partly built by the woodworkers for the village for kids. And it's a 2,000 square foot, tree house. They've got pathways that go down to the lake because I'm sorry. And then on top of that, some people may know, and I think, Randy, you may be aware of this. There's a chapel called the Thorncrown Chapel up in Eureka Springs. Fantastically beautiful place. Now, let me give you a little history here, people. The Thorncrown Chapel was built by Fay Jones. Fay Jones was a student of Frank Lloyd Wright. Fay Jones did the DeSoto Club that I'm looking at just down the way. He did the initial tower as you come in the front of the village. He did a lot of other things. And the people that owned Anthony Timber, the Anthony family, hired him to come in, or they basically replicated Thorncrown Chapel. Thorncrown Chapel is kind of a blue-gray wood, kind of a darker stain. This is more of a pine oak look. And once again, it looks, and the Thorncrown Chapel looks out across the Eureka Springs Mountains and the Ozark Mountains. This looks out over Lake Hamilton, and it is pristine. Talk about a place to have a wedding. Oh, my Lord. So Garvan Gardens with the Anthony Chapel, the Anthony Bell Tower. And during Christmas time, they have an incredible light show that is beyond compare.
Now, and I should know this because I did go to a wedding last year inside an area that had signs that it was operated by the University of Arkansas, this big glass chapel.
I think that's the Anthony Chapel. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was, but yeah, unbelievable.
It is. Well, and I love being in Eureka Springs. I love looking out over the mountains. I think that's very peaceful and helpful to my soul.
Yep.
Looking out over the lake, and we talked about how occupied Lake Hamilton is, right?
Yes.
Well, you look out over the lake, you don't see any other houses from this viewpoint. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
It takes Lake Hamilton, which has been built up by Entergy all these years, and it's an energy supply lake. And it makes it feel a little wild again, like what it would have been 100 years ago or 50 years ago.
Right.
It was a little more pristine.
And let me encourage the audience who's listening, to those of you that are watching the YouTube video, which, by the way, the show is available on both. So if you like to, I don't know why you'd want to look at us, but if you do, then we welcome you to do that. So, but I'm going to put links to these places, and we're going to put photographs. So, yeah, let me encourage you to go to this episode of hsvinsideout.com, and no need to take notes or anything like that. So, okay, keep going. Let's bring us on around.
And once again, hsvinsideout.com, and we are real people, and we will reply to your questions. If you want to, I think one of the questions that people are eventually going to ask is, what's in this for you and me? And the bottom line is, we're here to promote the village and the area around it. It's just, if you could come here and see the quality of life, it's extraordinary.
Well, the thing in it for me is hopefully the same thing that's in it for at least a big portion of our audience, to learn more. You're a native of the state. You've been around that area all of your life. Man, I came to it in 2018. Prior to 2018, I had no idea that this place, Hot Springs Village, Arkansas, existed. I'd heard of Hot Springs. I'd been through Hot Springs. But I've spent no time around there and had no concept. And I'm like, how have I not heard about this? Especially because I'm in Dallas-Fort Worth, and I'm in Tarrant County, so I'm more on the Fort Worth side of things. It's 5 hours door to door. If I were to set out and drive right now, within 5 hours, almost to the minute, I could be at your house. Now, 1 hour of that is me just trying to get out of Dallas, right? So, but that's a short drive. So it's really spectacular when you think about all these places that you're mentioning, that, I mean, they're within an hour of Hot Springs Village, which is why we went with this whole moniker of HSV Inside Out, because it's not just about the village, but the village is home plate, and the village is absolutely the star of the show. So, yeah, continue.
Well, and just to echo on that real quick, if Hot Springs Village was isolated and there was a desert all outside of it, Hot Springs Village would be pretty nice. But what people don't recognize is, just like I was telling you, you've driven past some of the nicest things. You know, the WPA camp and Fort Mountain, and you know, instead of driving past, if you're coming to visit us, we want you to have a great time. We want you to go by and, well, that's what he talked about, and this is what they talked about. And it's ironic. I don't know, how long have we been talking? 30 minutes, maybe.
I don't know.
Yeah, who cares, right?
Exactly.
My point being,
there's not anything. There's no too long. There's just too boring.
I agree. Well, we're about to get to the good stuff, believe it or not. You know, it's ironic. We've talked this entire time and not said one word about Hot Springs National Park.
Yeah, exactly.
Which, I mean, that's what everybody is fixated and fascinated with. Now, let's cover some quick things. Panther Mountain Lodge, Panther Mountain Riding Stables. That's a great place to go riding. Lots of people ask about that. We've covered the Crystal Mines. We've covered the Garvan Gardens. We've covered a lot of this other stuff. Let me give you I'm just going to quote some quick stats about the national park and dispel some rumors too. There was in Hot Springs, Idaho. You can just climb down into the hot springs and just sit in the hot tub. It's kind of cool, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hot Springs was declared the Valley of the Vapors by the Indians and all the warring tribes. And when you were in the Valley of the Vapors, you didn't fight. You could go a lot of places, and you may be my mortal enemy, and I may just hate you with a blood rage. But if I get injured, I'm going to go to the Valley of the Vapors, and I'm not going to fight you there. Isn't that interesting? It was a truce area. And honestly, there are others that talk about the history of Hot Springs, and they talk about that, ironically, even when it was the gangster era, there was a truce of sorts, that let's not fight, let's not make a bloody mess here. Okay. Yeah. And what you have to understand is that there's, up on the mountain behind the Bathhouse Road, as you drive down Bathhouse Road, many of you have either seen the footage or you've been down Bathhouse Road. As you drive down Bathhouse Road, underneath you is a 21-foot diameter tube carrying Hot Springs Creek. Now, Hot Springs Creek starts around, you know, Randy, where you go around the corner and you're coming out toward 5, like you're coming that way, and there's a little fountain kind of right in the middle.
Yeah.
When Carroll comes together, the fountain, the creek goes under there. The creek actually starts in Wharton Park. It's a W. It'll come to me. It's the Wheatley Park. If you come to that fountain and turned right, you would go up into Wheatley Park, which is a beautiful, beautiful walking park on both sides. But it has literally a couple of gullies that are ditches that are 10 or 12 feet wide, and it gathers that water, goes under the road, goes under by the Arlington, goes all the way down and comes out by Hollywood Park, which is another fantastic place. Beautiful train trestle. It's historic. Great place to go take pictures. Thousands of lilies. But the Hot Springs, hot water has defined Hot Springs since the day it was born, and for better or worse. And 100 years ago, 120 years ago, that was an open river creek sewer. And that's when they put that tube in there. And now when you're driving down that road, you're on top of Hot Springs Creek. And the excess water that comes down from the bathhouses go into that creek and go out to the lake. On the right-hand side, literally the middle of the line is the delineation between the city and the national park. On the right-hand side, you'll see a whole row of old red brick buildings, which I think are just nearly as fascinating for a very interesting reason in just a minute. And on the other side, you have the bathhouses that everybody's familiar with and whatever. And a lot of people will ask, well, what happened to the bathhouses? They're so beautiful and elegant, and they're very Elizabethan. What happened? And the one word, penicillin. Because you would come down from Chicago for the cure. And the cure meant you had venereal disease 9 times out of 10. So that's what they brought you down for. And you would sit in these, if you get a chance to come, simply go to the Fordyce House. The joke, here's how you remember the name, the Fordyce House. Colonel Fordyce was a Civil War commander. And there's a city in South Arkansas called Fordyce, and it's a little bitty timber town. And if one more person leaves, they're going to call it 3 dice. So,
yeah,
bada bing.
Yeah.
Okay.
I need sound effects. I'll have that ready for the next show.
You'll add that in. You'll add that in.
I'll have a rim shot.
The Fordyce House on the left-hand side was the most glorious of all these, and it's turned into the National Park Museum. It's open every day except for Christmas and New Year's, and it's only open from 8 to 5. Now, it would be beautiful any other time, but it's open all the time, just only till 5. In the very basement, there's a old timey elevator that looks like Igor from the movie Young Frankenstein would run it.
Yeah, right.
You know, what hump, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you slam these things back and forth and sparks fly, and in 120-year-old elevator goes up and down the shaft. No exaggeration. That's right beside the 3 bowling lanes that are down there. No kidding.
Oh, really?
Right beside the literally there's a spring that comes right out of the wall, and you can look through the glass and look into the spring. When they built the Fordyce, there was
whilst you're bowling.
Yeah, whilst you're, well, that's on the other side of the basement.
Okay.
You would have to bring your bowling ball from the other side of the basement over to look at the fountain, past the elevator, then back to the bowling alley. But it would work. It would work.
Yeah, I got you.
You go up to the first level, and I love this part of the story. I'm not going to give it all away, but I will somewhat. When you walk in the women's side first. You remember what 20, 30 years ago, everybody had generic cigarettes like they were a whole lot cheaper.
Right.
Because they had a white wrapper.
Yeah.
You walk into the women's side and it's this wall of white. They've got white towels lined up. They've got white beds lined up, and it's this cooling room. And you walk in from there into another a bathroom of sorts where you have the baths, and you would have a shower, and there's a needle shower, and there's all kinds of, you know, exotic equipment for the day, but everything is white. Everything is white. The marble is white. Everything is white. Then you go back to the house of torture. I mean, the medical procedure room is what they called it. Yeah. And, you know, when you had a bunion, and I happened to have a sander with a drill bit on the end of it.
Right.
You know, right. So, and they have you remember the old Popeye commercials or cartoons where they would have a steam bath, and they would wrap a towel around your neck, and you would sit in this cabinet. Yeah. They have those cabinets. So the ladies' side is all obviously segregated, but then when you go to the back, there's communal when you're in this medical procedure room. Then walk from there into the men's side, and it's mahogany and swirling beautiful marble and glass. And no, I'm not exaggerating in any way. There's a statue in the middle of Pocahontas, and Pocahontas is holding up a deal to John, and the DeSoto is here, and there's a swirling stained glass window above your head of naked women and fish swimming around, and you're like, this looks, if the women knew what this looked like, we would be in real trouble.
Yeah, they wouldn't let us in here.
Wouldn't let us in.
Yeah.
Anyway, you go, that's the men's bathing room. You go to the second room, and there was the second floor, and it's kind of a dancing fellowship, maybe a socializing place. The third floor above that is hotel rooms, and we could, I don't know how wide the picture is behind me, but we could probably get 2 hotel rooms in the width of range behind me.
Right.
There was enough room to turn around and lay down on a bed, and that was about it.
Yeah.
But the reason is you would go in, and on the beds, they have these little passes, and they would have a 21 bath pass, a 14 pass, or a 7 pass. And that would be for a week. So you would rent a week there, and you would have a bath a day, or 2 baths a day, or 3 baths a day. And then you would hike the mountain over the top, this goat pass that goes into Gulf of Gorge on the other side, and you would come back. Now, I'm looking at 60 next year, okay? And I'm a pretty healthy guy for 60, okay? And I don't mean healthy like fat. I mean pretty in shape. So, right?
Yeah.
And I will promise you, if you can hike over that mountain and come back, you're cured. Promise.
Yeah, you don't need any more baths after that.
You've had all the baths. You ain't got no more problems. You're cured.
Right.
But one of the common misconceptions as you come down that hill, and I'll come back to the building in just a second. Well, let me finish the building. The third floor is a really nice hotel, basically, and changing room. You walk into the 4th floor, and it looks like something out of a cartoon, because it's a gymnasium with the big leather medicine balls, the hemp rope that you climb to the top, with the juggling, but the wooden juggling baton. It looks literally out of the turn of the century. But above that, you can see that there's something above that. And on the 5th floor, that's where they would do dancing under the stars at night.
Oh, there you go.
Now, if you go up to the 5th floor and you can look out, you would be literally looking at eye level at the promenade that goes behind from one end of the other of the Bathhouse row. The promenade, if you don't do anything else in the village, in Hot Springs, go through the Fordyce house and walk the promenade that goes from one end to the other. Behind the promenade, there's these big green boxes, and I mean 2 feet by 2 feet, 3 feet by 3 feet. That is where they capture the spring water, and they bring it down, cool it down, divert it, and put it back in for the bathhouses. So about 2 or 3 years, maybe 5 years ago, there was a movie, there was a Vacation 2 or something like that. And the joke was they were going to go bathe in the hot springs at Hot Springs, Arkansas. There are no open hot springs in Hot Springs, Arkansas for you to bathe in.
Well, I was fixing to ask that.
The water is radioactive. I would encourage you to not get in 149 degree water and melt your skin off. That's a bad idea.
No,
a bad idea.
And if you did survive, glow in the dark. So that's
then there you are. You know, your wife's going, honey, would you quit glowing? I'm trying to sleep, right?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I didn't know that.
There is one fountain. There's a man-made fountain. Basically, it's real spring water that flows down the side of the mountain. Tufa, that natural coral-looking formation, actually grows on that at 146 to 149 degrees. Comes down, and there's a pool in Arlington Park right there beside the Arlington Hotel. That is the genuine water. It's way too hot to sit in. You wouldn't ever want to do that. Yeah. And you can taste it or whatever, but it'd be a bad idea to lay in it too long.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Okay. And we're at this point, we're how many minutes outside the village?
No more than 25 minutes.
Yeah. It's amazing, isn't it?
It really is. And I just mentioned the Arlington Park there. There's a huge open place. That is where they had the second Arlington Hotel, and the Arlington Hotel is the one with the twin spires right beside the park. And they built that one in 1922 to 1924 after the second wooden one burned in 1922, because a bathhouse where you have natural flame, not much electricity because that's starting to come out, and a lot of open wood.
Bad combo. Yeah, bad combination. Right? Yeah, right.
So they built across the street, and in 1924. The part where the park is right now, that was actually national park ground, but the Arlington had built there and they didn't want to run them out. Well, when they burned it down, they were like, move across the street over here, guys. And by the way, the last thing I'll mention very quickly, and I got to take a break and take a sip here real quick, but the Arlington Hotel has been purchased about 3 years ago. And they are talking about a remodel. One of the issues with the Arlington Hotel, nothing 25 million couldn't fix. But it was the largest hotel in Arkansas for a long time. It's certainly the oldest hotel in Arkansas. But the hallways are not air conditioned. The rooms are air conditioned, but the hallways are not. And so the building's not up to code. The fire marshal had a coronary and fell back in it. It's a lot of things. So there's a discussion that they may close it down and remodel it for as many as 3 years. If you're coming to Hot Springs anytime soon, come see it now. There are 1925 Art Deco paintings on the wall that have been there since 1925. There is a jazz trio. Today's Friday. There's a jazz trio that will be playing tonight that has played there for over 22 years. And they're fantastic. And you just go in, you go over, get a drink at the bar, which the bar is magnificent. Get a bag of popcorn. They're always getting away popcorn. And just sit and listen to the jazz band.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right. Is this a good halfway point from our 360?
Yeah.
Do we need to have a second episode?
I think we really do.
Then let's end this one.
Let's end
this one. You take a drink and you end this one. Okay, again, to reiterate to our audience, number one, thanks for sticking with us. We know this may not sound like compelling audio, but we hope it is, in the fact that it just sparks some interest. We're going to have extensive show notes about all this. So no need to think, wait a minute, I can't follow. So let me encourage you to go to the website, check out the links. I don't know, maps. We'll figure something out. We're going to give you all the tools to take advantage of all these places, because I've already met enough people to know that what you just heard Dennis describe, there are people who have been in Arkansas for years and years that probably don't know of some of these details and some of these places that he's mentioned. So now you know why the name of the podcast is HSV Inside Out, or Hot Springs Village InsideOut.com. So we'll put links in the show notes to all this, and I'll let you take us home, Dennis.
Well, I tell you what, number one, thanks for being so patient. And honestly, in today's day and time, when everything is so rushed and so hurried, thank you for taking time to listen to, frankly, the auditory craft, be that as it may, to paint the pictures, to try and explain to you what it looks like. It's certainly worth your visit. It's worth your time. And we really appreciate your listening to HSVInsideOut.com with Randy Cantrell and Dennis Simpson. And we will talk to you next time.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Hot Springs Village Inside Out, a podcast where Hot Springs Village, Arkansas is the star. Please subscribe to the podcast. You can do that by visiting our website, hsvinsideout.com. and tell a friend.